Hello, my name is Medea. I am a chartered physiotherapist and thank you so much for the invite to this group. I'm going to give it a few moments just for everyone to join us. If you have any questions, please pop them down below. And if you're watching this on repeat, if you drop the questions below, I will be in the group for the next few days and I'll be happy to answer any questions you have, other women's health physiotherapy questions or particularly related to back care, which is what we are going to be talking about today. So I was going to start off with a little introduction about our spine so we kind of understand what it actually does. And so therefore I can then share my top tips on how to look after it. So a little bit about me first. So I'm a chartered physiotherapist. I've specialised in women's health. I have 3 children and I'm really passionate about women looking after themselves and therefore we can better look after our children really. So I think prioritising ourselves is super important. So I'm really grateful to have this opportunity to talk to you this evening. So let's get going. So I'm going to start off with a little bit of anatomy. That's my kind of thing. I love that. So I've got my little friend Mr. Skeleton behind me here. So briefly going through our anatomy here, we've got our neck, which is known as our cervical spine. So we have like 7 sections here. Then we come down onto our thoracic spine. This is generally 12 sections, so from the knobbly bit at the back of your neck to the end of your ribs. Then we come into the lumbar, which most of us know about here. So as you can see, the bones get a lot bigger compared to here where the ends are very narrow and it's harder to feel. And then as we come down to the bottom here, we come to our sacrum where the bones are fused together. And that's normal, that's what we expect. And then we come right in between our bum cheeks and we have our tailbone. So therefore we have our coccyx, sacrum, lumbar, thoracic and our cervical spine. So this is all classed as your back. So when you're talking about back, it's the whole spine. Yeah, it's not just this little bit above your bottom, which we all tend to kind of think about. Another crucial bit to think about and be aware of here is this bit here, known as our sacroiliac joint. This joins onto our pelvis, so that's quite important with our movement. And coming up the top here, we have our shoulder blades, which sit on our rib cage, and at the front, they join with our collarbone, our clavicle. So that's really important when we're thinking about how we move with our shoulders, how that affects our back, how we move with our hips, how that affects our lower back. So if you have any questions for those of you joining in, pop them down below and I will come through and scroll through them at the end if that's okay. But drop them as you go along, as you think about them. Don't save it to the end to write them in, just pop them in straight away. So that's a little bit of anatomy of where we are with my little friend here. And then I've got my spine and my pelvis here, which I'll go through. So in terms of my kind of top tips regarding the back. Now, obviously we know the back is super important to support us so we can move our arms and legs more freely and we can go about our daily tasks. Now, my top tips for looking after your back is being aware of where it is and how it moves. So it does forward bending, it does rotation, and it does extension, so the leaning back element. Now we spend a lot of our time leaning forward, be it working at the computer, picking and lifting the kids, vacuuming, mopping, all the daily chores that we tend to do is very much forward. So we don't do very much extension. So my first top tip would be to focus on the way that you stand and the way that you sit. Now, thinking about the positions in how you do that are really important because if you can focus on yourself on the way you stand, so having equal weight on your left and right leg, having equal weight on your toes as your heels, and so you're nice and even side to side and front and back, you're going to allow all the muscles coming up your back in your tummy to hold you well. And similarly, when you're sitting, hold you well in the correct position and having your pelvis in the correct position. So this means that all the muscles around the spine are going to be working at the optimal level, at the correct length, and therefore they are going to be supporting your back to hopefully prevent you having any back issues. My top tip number 2 is to remember that like if you were at work and you were kind of at a desk, you would think about how that space works for you, where your screen is, how you're sitting, how your mouse is, all that kind of lovely jazzy stuff you do at work. Bring that back to your home environment, especially for those that have got younger ones. Think about the way you set up your station for changing the nappy, how you're doing bath time, how you're doing story time, and think, are there ways that I can make this so it's more friendly for my back, my partner's back, anyone that else is having to constantly lift and move the baby or the toddlers around. So thinking about changing stations, having it at a height where you can stand comfortably and be at level with your tummy really, so you're not leaning over. So it doesn't have to be a fancy changing table as such, it can be a mat on top of a chest of drawers which you've made nice and secure. Similarly for bath time, I love the little portable baths which you can put on little legs, which you can have in the bathroom or you can pop on the floor. Saves you constantly having to lean over. As the baby gets bigger, as a toddler, and you find that you don't, they're too big to use a portable bath, what you can do, and I find sometimes it's nice, is just for one of you to get into the bath with them. Therefore you're at level height with them, you can play and wash, and maybe then the partner kind of takes the baby out, and therefore you're constantly avoiding that kind of bending over the bath. So things like that, and like prams, making sure you're adjusting the height of the pram compared to when your partner's holding baby, and pushing the toddlers compared to when you are doing that yourself as well. Tip, I think number 3 we're on now, is be kind to your pelvic floor. Now a lot of people feel that the pelvic floor is only important when you're pregnant and you have to do pelvic floor exercises, or secondly when you are maybe having leakages. Now that's all very well to focus it on then, but coming back to back care, if you think of the bottom of if you imagine it a bit like a box, so we've got our diaphragm, tummy muscles, back muscles, and the bottom of that is our pelvic floor. So my top tip for number 3 would be thinking about your pelvic floor when you're focusing on lifting. So we all know we should bend our knees and hips and shouldn't bend our back, and we try to do that as much as possible. But what you want to do is engage your pelvic floor before you lift. So getting that back passage, front passage, engaged, so closing it together, lift what you need to, and then let it relax. So that's known as our knack, meaning you're engaging the pelvic floor before you lift something to give you that support from underneath, to give you that strength to look after your back. So you're not going, you're not doing that strain, you're getting that support from underneath to push up. And then tip number 4, I'd move on to, I could talk about pelvic floor all day, so any pelvic floor questions, do pop them down. Tip number 4 will then be working on our tummy, so going back to that box that we're working on here, our tummy muscles, super important. They do change after we had baby, don't worry too much about the kind of tone and the shape of them. What you really want to focus on is building the strength in them so they're nice and strong. Whether you've had a C-section, whether you had a vaginal birth, whether it's been years since you've had your kids, working on your core stability is super, super important. And that's thinking about all the muscles that encompass around your actual spine, really deep down here, which gives the spine enough to move around. Not just the superficial ones that come across the top from our ribs to our pelvis. We want to be really deep in. So core stability exercises are super useful. If you've got a gym ball from when you were pregnant, the big exercise balls, have a sit on that. Or you can do Pilates, excellent. I have lots of Pilates videos that you can do. I'll drop a link to some free videos I've got on the YouTube channel which you can hopefully use to kind of get you started. So work on your tummy muscles, and then finally working on the back muscles. So lots of exercises where you're getting that extension, so kind of lifting, if you're lying down and you're lifting your head and shoulders up to really strengthen the back muscles. So all that time you're leaning forward, you've got a chance to get the extension in. And then listen to your back. So my final, I think that is my 5th tip, would be to listen to your back. A lot of people I see as a physiotherapist goes, oh, I know, it was niggly got better, had a little niggle again, always got better, but this time it's loads worse. And it's like your body was trying to tell you before, there's something needs to change. Yeah, there's some things we can't avoid. We can't avoid lifting the kids. We can't avoid maybe certain activities we have to do in our job which are more strenuous on our back. But our back is not vulnerable. Our back is very dynamic, it's very strong, and actually, you know, we need to give it a lot of credit, but we have to be mindful of what we're doing and how we're doing it. And if we're repeatedly doing the same movement again and again, we want to think about when we're not doing those movements, what we can do, which is the opposite, to counterbalance it. So if we're always leaning for work, when it's your free time, you're kind of getting that extension. And that fifth point comes to make it integral into your routine. Don't feel that you have to bring in exercise or a certain workout or a certain technique only for when it's bad or at the end of the day. Think about it as little steps that you can do throughout the day, which is going to keep the pain at bay, it's going to keep movement flowing, it's going to stop you from straining. If you're having any leakage because you're constantly clenching, it's going to help all that relax. So they are my top 5 tips. Any questions, pop them down below. I will scroll down and see how many I can answer and help. As I said, I am in the group for the next few days as well, so I'm happy to come back and look at the questions for those that are watching on replay. I will also drop a link to my YouTube channel, which has lots of mini 10-15 minute workouts which you can pace and do throughout the day or the week. You know, it doesn't have to be a whole hour session that you've got to think about when it comes to your exercise, but do prioritize some time in your day to focus on your back. And lastly, yeah, thank you for having me so much in this group. And I will leave my details below, as I said. So I'm going to quickly scroll through, see if there's any questions that I can help with, okay? So pop them down. Thank you for watching as well. Nice to see you, Olivia, Natalie, Victoria, Louise, Lisa. Thank you for watching. Hope you found that useful. If you don't have any questions, that's fine. Maybe just pop a little emoji or a little, I don't know, a little something just to let me know it was helpful. And even if it's not for yourself currently, maybe it's some sort of information that you can pass on to your loved ones around you that might be struggling with back pain, or actually just ways to prevent it becoming an issue in the first place as well. Thank you so much, Lisa. Glad you found it informative. So I will leave it there for now. As I said, drop any questions later on and I will be around to answer. Thank you so much for listening and have a lovely evening. Take care.